I'm going to start off by reading something. This is a poem written by H.P. Blavatsky. Does anybody know who that is? Anyone heard that name before? A couple of us. Okay. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. She's a Russian. She was a Russian. Terry's going to give us some history on who she is and the organization that she spearheaded back in the late 1800s in just a little while. But first, this poem sets up the general idea of what we're here to do. The entire book and what we believe our path in this lifetime and all of our lifetimes is. There's a road, steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road. And it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. And there is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lives in which success may come. Okay. So we'll let that sink in for a few minutes before we go back to it and discuss who, what, where, when, and why, and everything about that. So my name is Paul Benedict, and I've lived in Vegas since 1991. And since this day at the Ganesha Center is set up for us to give an introduction for who Terry and I are and how and why we wrote our book called Ancient Wisdom for a New Age. And I guess I'll keep that with me for a moment. A practical guide for spiritual growth. The way that I met Terry is kind of a cool story, and the way this book came about is a cool story, and I'll give a version of it, and then Terry will give a...
I'll give you the real version.
The other version. You guys can decide which is real. We'll see who's more believable. The first introduction I ever had to the concept of spiritual growth was in 2001. I had never heard of meditation or contemplation or consciousness expansion before that. I was baptized Eastern Orthodox Christian. My mother is still very Christian, and I had never heard of meditation before 2001 when I attended a Psi seminar. Has anyone ever been to a Psi seminar? Okay, you have. I know you guys have. PSI seminar. So that was the first introduction to any type of inward looking for answers and for growth. So a few years went by after 2001, and it didn't really affect me at a profound level until 2005. When I was helping my cousin purchase a home. I'm a real estate broker here in Las Vegas. And when you help, as a real estate agent, when you help someone buy a home, you spend a lot of personal time with them and you get to know them on a fairly intimate level. And my cousin Bonnie and her husband Ted are very spiritual, and they're involved in many aspects of the spiritual path here in Las Vegas and in California where they're from. And I was asking lots of questions, and she said, well, I can try to answer these questions, but I know someone who can answer them better than I can, and so she introduced me to Terry, and he at the time was teaching a basic class on theosophy, and I thought it was the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen or heard of in my entire life. And that was probably in 2007. It was all the answers to all the spiritual ideas and concepts that I'd heard little bits and pieces about, but it was succinct, and it was a teaching that was presented kind of in a nice package with a bow. This is the way spirituality works. I'm like, wow, okay, that's very cool. So I attended his classes, and I repeated the class a couple times because it was just so fascinating, and I wanted more as well. So I contacted him personally and asked if I could come hang out for a while and discuss some things and just learn more. So I asked him personal questions, and I picked his brain a little bit about his history and theosophy and spiritual growth. And so we became friends, and close friends. I realized that this guy had something special that I wanted to glean from. And so that lasted for about a year or two before I introduced him to this book, which I was surprised he hadn't heard of yet.
I had heard of it. I didn't have it.
He didn't have the book yet. So this is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I had listened to the audiobook and I thought it was profound also. Nowhere in here is theosophy mentioned. So I thought it was interesting that it was a very amazing and profound teaching, but totally separate from this other amazing teaching that I had discovered with Terry called Theosophy. So I gave this exact book to Terry, and he read it and thought it was quite profound also, and we decided that we needed to share this with more people. So combining the teachings of Eckhart Tolle with the teachings of Theosophy seemed to be a brilliant idea and seemed to be a very inclusive way to present spiritual growth. So in 2009, we started our own discussion group on this book while bringing in the concepts of Theosophy, and that was, let's see, that probably started in September of 2009, and that lasted for about 10 months. And we had probably 20 or 30 people that attended those discussion groups. We went through each chapter of the book, and we had discussions, meditation practices, exercises, homework even, and we also brought in the ideas of Theosophy and intertwined the two and showed that the history and the scientific aspects of Theosophy were complemented perfectly by the practical aspects of Eckhart Tolle and his real life, everyday ideas on how to live your life specifically towards shedding ego and connecting with your true self, which is basically what our book is about. So our book was born out of the combination of the Eckhart Tolle material and Theosophy, along with our own ideas and insights into life and how we think it works. And we think it's pretty cool. So in let's see, in 2009 we began the idea for the book. So practical, real-world practices and application, along with the history of Eastern philosophy, esoteric Buddhism, Raja Yoga, along with the Eckhart Tolle practices and our own insights, and that's how this book was born. So last July we published, and here it is today. All right. What's next, Terry?
Well, let's see. Let me have you pass these out. These are two charts that are also included in our book on pages 32 and 33, but it's in many ways the basis, one of the basic teachings of Theosophy is that we are much more than just our physical self and the personality that we know. What is your name, for example? What is your name?
I'm Lorraine Walton.
Lorraine. All right, so when we think of Lorraine, we see a physical image, we think of a personal interaction, certain qualities, certain characteristics, don't we?
Tell me.
I don't know. But that is our concept of who a person is. So Theosophy and the ancient wisdom teachings teach us that we are much more than that. If you look at the chart here, for example, what we consider the personality consists of only the first four, when you look under the human constitution. The lowest four, which is the physical body, the energy or prana, which makes it a live, living organism, our emotional state or the astral plane of consciousness, and the lower mental, our mind. That's really the personality. But Theosophy teaches us that there's far more than that. So let me go back a little farther and catch you up to how I came to these teachings. And by the way, Theosophy is not the only one that teaches the ancient wisdom teachings. It's just the most recent iteration in a large-scale production, so to speak, of the same teachings that are included in every major religion in the world. Every major religion was founded by an enlightened being, someone who has attained a certain level of understanding of how life works, not just the physical world, but all the realms that we're showing here. Our highest nature is not this personality, but what we call the spiritual triad, the Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. Those are the three that most of us know almost nothing about, but they're really what constitutes the soul. It's the human soul is at those three levels of consciousness, and that's not the highest. It goes on and on from there. Beyond that, it's hard. It's not even worth speculating as to what it is. We're doing well if we can even make a tiny bit of contact with that higher spiritual triad that I mentioned. So how did I come to Theosophy? I grew up in northern Arizona on a ranch, and in a very traditional, devout Mormon family. Not just a Mormon family, but a fourth generation Mormon family. One of my ancestors joined the Mormon Church 3 years after it was instituted and knew Joseph Smith personally. So that's how founded my family is in the Mormon Church. At 19 years old, I decided to go on a mission, which is common for boys in the Mormon Church. And went to the wild jungles of France and Switzerland to save the natives, preach Christianity to them. So I had always been of a spiritual nature, even as a young boy, but I wasn't convinced that the Mormon philosophy had what I wanted. So I said, I'm going to donate 2 years of my life to this. And if at the end of 2 years I'm not convinced that it's what I'm seeking, then I'm just going to look somewhere else. And at the end of the 2-year period, I was even less convinced than when I left, so I said, okay, I need to look somewhere else. I know it's out there somewhere. I'm going to find it. So for about 5 years, I kind of searched, but I didn't know where to start searching. And ended up studying astrology and learning a few things about metaphysics, but nothing completely was calling me, saying, okay, this is it. Until one day, and it was here in Las Vegas. I first moved here in 1975, and I was helping out a friend who owned a very small metaphysical bookstore. And there were plenty of times when no one was there, and I would just pick up a book and look, kind of leaf through it. I picked up this book one day, The Masters in the Path, and I started reading the first chapter, and you know how it is when you get that little shiver that goes down your spine? I said, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. So I bought the book, took it home, and read it in 2 days. I couldn't stop reading until I got tired. I would go to sleep, and the first thing in the next morning I got up and started reading again. In 2 days I read the entire book, and I said, this is what I've been looking for. And in 38 years I haven't changed my mind. So C.W. Leadbeater was a theosophist, and one of the major second generation theosophists. But that introduced me to a new range of understanding, which we refer to as the ancient wisdom teachings. And so I studied that ever since, all of the teachings. And in the last, I've started 2 different study groups here in Las Vegas. The first one was in 1978, and then more recently, around 2007, I started another one here, specifically for theosophical concepts, and that's where Paul came in. He came to some of the classes there. So I have done a lot of serious studying and a lot of trying to figure out the practical side of it. That's not easy. Theosophy is great. It teaches you lots of theory. Teaches you pretty much everything you need to know. But there's almost no practical application to it. You have to come up with that on your own. So when Paul introduced me to Eckhart Tolle's teachings, I thought, that's it. That's it. That's the combination. He's got the psychological insight into the modern human brain. Theosophy has the theory and the understanding of how life operates. Put those two together and you've got the perfect product. Now the serious student is ready to make some progress. Now you've got something you can sink your teeth into and actually start putting those concepts to work in your personal life. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it. Oh, by the way, if anyone has questions as we go, please ask, assuming that it's pertinent to what we're discussing right now. At the end, we'll open up for any discussion. You can ask anything at all. You may or may not answer it, but you can ask anything you want at the end, and we'll be happy to entertain your questions on any subject at that point.
So, do you want to go into what the book is not?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me tell you what the book is not, and then Paul will tell you what it is. It's some of you already know it. How many of you've read the book, or at least parts of it? You've read parts of it.
I've read parts of it, just the beginning.
All right. So what is it not? It's not a formula book. If you go to any metaphysical bookstore, you can tell the formula books. They're usually thin. They have lots of little talking points. And they kind of bring stuff from just, research that's been done on the internet on whatever the topic seems to be. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of insight. It's kind of just accumulating and presenting information. And that can be helpful. It's, I buy those books and I put them on my shelf, and every once in a while I'll pull it down and kind of thumb through it and I'll find something that's inspirational. But they're generally not the type of book that you just keep by the side of your bed and read a little bit every day and feel like your life is better because of this profound understanding that you get from it. When we wrote the book and we're looking for a publisher to publish it, one of them said his only suggestion was cut the book in half. So I thought, well, which half do we cut out, first or the second half? But publishers are looking for that. They're looking for those little, anyone can latch onto it. Anyone can glean something from it. So our book is not a formula book. It's also not to enhance your ego. How many of you have read any of Eckhart Tolle's books? So you know that especially his book on A New Earth is all about eliminating the ego, isn't it? Eliminating the ego. One of the books that had a profound influence on our own book is called The Science of Yoga. Paul's going to talk to you a little more about it. But in this book, it tells you that yoga is all about eliminating the I, capital I, consciousness. Getting rid of the ego. Now for most people that's pretty daunting, isn't it? Getting rid of the ego? Wait a minute, that's me. I am the ego. No, you're not. You're not. That's what we're here to help you understand, is that you are not the ego. You are not the personality. The true human being is the soul, the spiritual triad. This vehicle is just that. It's a vehicle. And it's here for the purpose of gaining experience. And Paul's going to tell you later about what your true goal is as a human being. And I think I'm going to turn it over to him right now, and then later I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about, specifically about theosophy. I know some of you know quite a bit, but some of you may be new to the idea of theosophy.
So what the book is not, and now what the book is. We have a little summary in the back of our book that says that it's a manual for life, and that really is what we had in mind. Life can be. People say life is unfair. I'm sure everyone has heard someone say life is just not fair, and people say life's a B word. They say that a lot. It's all in how we approach it, and the hardest pill to swallow is knowing that we have created this for ourselves. Because every thought we think and every emotion we feel constructs our reality, inside and outside. When I say yoga, what comes to mind? Just the word yoga. What do physical postures come to mind?
Yes.
Okay.
I do that every day.
Okay. What kind of postures do you do?
Just balancing and over and under and
Okay.
everything that I can do that where I'm still on my feet. I can't get down on the floor
You don't need to
anymore.
be on your feet for physical yoga. Has anybody ever heard of different schools of yoga?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
India's full of them.
What's that?
India's full of them.
Okay. So yoga isn't only one thing. It's not only asanas or physical postures. There are several schools of yoga. And one of the key concepts in our book and in our teaching, and we've realized that it's basically our dharma in life, Terry and I, we're sharing the school of Raja Yoga. Raja is a Sanskrit word that means royal or king. So Raja Yoga is the royal yoga, the king of yogas. And it's not Hatha Yoga, which is physical yoga. That's a different school. Hatha yoga is basically what we think of when we look at downward dogs and dancer's pose and Bikram yoga and these different things. Raja Yoga is basically mind control. It's controlling our mind. It's controlling our thoughts. Everything in our life, inside of us, and our physical realities are created by our thoughts. Not necessarily only in this lifetime. Mainly from previous lifetimes. That's why we need to set our sights far into the future when we do anything. What am I doing right now in this moment that's going to affect me in 10 minutes and in 10 lifetimes? It's real. What we do right now creates karma that can come back to us now, or we can experience it in 20 years or next lifetime, and definitely throughout the succession of lifetimes until we balance it out. That's why Raja Yoga, controlling our mind, controlling our thoughts, setting up our reality, is key. That is how we take one step and then another step on the path to spiritual expansion. It's understanding how we work so we can understand how life works. Yoga defined. Oh, by the way, we should probably mention that the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are the authoritative treatise on what yoga is. Has anyone heard of Patanjali before? Okay. Does anyone know who he is or what he was, or just the name? There isn't much information about him. We don't know exactly when he lived, and we don't know when his sutras were compiled. Some say it was in the 1300s or 1500s, some say it was thousands of years ago, but there are quite a few books that have been written on the Yoga Sutras. And this is one of the best. This is by a guy named I.K. Taimni. It's called The Science of Yoga. And the Yoga Sutras are short verses. How many are there? How many total sutras are there?
I believe...
Like 80?
No. It's about 200 approximately.
Okay.
But
And
each one is just one paragraph.
they were in Sanskrit, so they've been translated, and many different authors have given their own exposition on them and done research. And this is one of the best books that we've found, and it's really cool to go through the Yoga Sutras from Taimni's perspective and see how much they mirror our book. This was written before Terry and I had actually explored this book. So, the second sutra is Yoga Defined. translated into English, yoga is the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. The inhibition of the modification of the mind. What the heck does that mean? Inhibiting the mind being modified. So, when the mind is modified, it's thinking, it's acting, it's vibrating, it's doing things. So yoga is calming the mind. It's also important to point out that mainstream science believes that thoughts originate in the physical brain. We'd like to challenge that. The mind is separate from the physical brain, and thoughts originate in the mind, the mental body. So we explain what that means in our book. May or may not going to happen later or tomorrow. When you think a thought repeatedly, it gains power, and it can be directed at a certain person or a certain situation or at ourselves. There's always an effect on ourself, even if the thought we think is directed on somebody else. So the power of thought is incredible, and we learn over time how to create more powerful thoughts, how to create our world and our reality and ourselves based on the strength of our thoughts, and meditation is key to that. We describe different stages of meditation in our book. First, being able to focus, which is the very basic part of meditation, then learning how to contemplate, which is the next stage up, and then what Taimni refers to as samadhi, which is the highest level of meditation. True identification with your higher self, not conscious in your physical body at all, but conscious and in union with our higher selves. So, said in a different way, Raja Yoga and our book is about reconnecting with our higher self, getting to know ourselves at a true level. Our true self is the higher self. The physical body is not our true selves. I'm sure we've heard that 1,000 times. But how do we actually do it? Well, there are many practices that we suggest that we can do on a daily basis in order to make contact with our higher self. Yoga means union. Religion also means union. It's not a common knowledge that yoga and religion have very similar derivations to link back, to tie back to our origins, to our history, to reunite ourselves, a physical body with our higher self, our temporary physical body with our permanent higher self. It's all very, very cool stuff. Okay.
All right. So what is theosophy? Let me first of all read you something from the back cover of the book. What is our purpose as humans? Does anybody ever lie awake at night and wonder, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What's going to happen to me after I die? What is our purpose in life? Well, we have the answer. As Paul said, people often say, life didn't come with a manual. I don't know how it works. Well, here it is. We've got it now. At least one version of it. And we think it's a fairly understandable one. We think it's one that most people can comprehend. We've written this in a very specific style. It looks a little daunting because there's 400 pages in this book. It's not that difficult. So let me explain to you that first of all, there's only, because there's a 48-page glossary, so that's not part of the text. There's an index at the back of it, which a lot of spiritual books, including Eckhart Tolle's books, don't even have an index. When I go to try to find something, I just have to wade through and try to find it on my own. There's no index. So there's only 333 pages, and look, the font is very big. This is a number 13 font for older people like me, so we can actually read it. And this was done on purpose. You'll also notice there's lots of white space on the pages. And that too is on purpose. Number one, it's less daunting. And number two, there's lots of room to write notes. I was meticulous about keeping my books in perfect condition, wouldn't even write my name in the beginning at the first page. Not anymore. If you see some of my books, they're just filled with notes. I even create my own index at the beginning. If I see something that I think I may want to refer back to, I'll make a note right at the beginning with the page number and a little description of what it is. So lots of room for notes. And you'll notice too there are lots of subsections. this is the type of book, and we designed it specifically so that you can pick it up and turn anywhere and just start reading. You don't have to read from start to finish. Some people do. We've had people that have read it 2 and 3 times, and they still keep going back to reread it. And there's no one right way to read it. Other people will start in the middle and will get caught up and will read to the end and then go back and pick it up at the beginning. But it's specifically written to make it as easy as possible, because some of these concepts are a little bit difficult. We've tried to make it as simple as possible. The other technique we've used that people seem to love is that it's written in the form of questions and answers. We have a student and 2 teachers. 1 student and 2 teachers. I know that's a little strange. But the teachers will teach a concept, and then the student asks questions about, well, what about this? I don't quite understand this. And we've had so many people that say, I was reading and I was asking a question, and then there was the same question I had in my mind. And now you answer it. They love this question and answer type of format. Some of the things we cover in this. First of all, the constitution of man. What are the different levels of consciousness? We talk about our spiritual journey, which is to, once the spirit has manifested and has come down into this world where we are cribbed, cabined, and confined for a specific reason, because that's only at that level that we can experience something that we can relate to as consciousness. We were perfect when we were at the more spiritual level. There was nothing imperfect except that we lacked experience. We lacked any sense of accomplishment. We had to come down, so to speak, through the different levels of being until we reached a point where it was more manageable. And then we could kind of interact with our environment. Then we can have experience. But the problem is reascending. Once we get enmeshed in this, in the symbolism is the lotus. The lotus, which grows in a muddy pond. You go to the bottom of this pond and it is black with mud. You can't see a quarter of an inch. And somehow this seed that gets planted in that mud knows to grow up through the water high enough until right at the surface. It reaches the surface and opens up to the sunlight. This is a symbolism of our human journey to enlightenment and to reconnecting with our source. And this is what we're teaching in this book. How do you maneuver that? How do you make that happen? Well, it will happen on its own. You, as an individual, will reincarnate, not you, the personality, and we won't delve too much into this, but it's all in the book that it's not the personality that reincarnates. So if somebody says, who was I in a previous lifetime? I can tell you, you were no one. This personality is one personality, and it will not reincarnate as such. Your higher self, your soul, will send down new incarnations. And each one is based on the experience of that previous one. But the personal recollections are cast aside. Those are of no import to the higher self, to the soul. It's not concerned with your emotional needs. It's only concerned with your spiritual growth, which is different. So, those are some of the things that are in here. Trying to grasp this concept of the human soul is not easy. It's completely alien to most people. We operate in a world of television and sports and drama and interpersonal connections, cats and dogs and pets and vacations, and that's the sort of thing we can relate to. The soul has no interest whatsoever in any of that, not even in your personal relationships. But it does have interest in is your universal love, your soul qualities. And there are not a lot of them because they're so all-encompassing. But universal love or unconditional love is one of them. And we can only begin to grasp the immense nature of that unconditional love. We talk about karma and reincarnation, some new concepts about how they work. And then we talk about the purpose as humans. What is our purpose as humans? Well, in Theosophy, we are taught that, same as in the Hermetic philosophy, that consciousness began not in the human kingdom, but much farther down, in the mineral kingdom. In the Hermetic axiom, it says the stone became a plant, the plant became an animal, the animal became a human, the human became a god, and the god is immortal. So there are actually many more steps between the human and what we would call a god, but this is what we refer to as the spiritual hierarchy. So the point is that the consciousness starts at a very low level and it gradually gains experience. So we're already well on our way to re-attaining our spiritual maximum, so to speak. Our goal in this realm or this range of evolution, which covers millions of years, is to gain the next highest level, which is beyond the human kingdom, but not yet what we would call a god. So what is that level? We call it adepts, masters, mahatmas. These are superhuman beings. They have graduated, so to speak, from the human kingdom. They no longer have to come back. So that is our purpose, is to graduate from the human kingdom, and at that point there are different that open up, and only one of them is to return and serve as a teacher to other human beings. Now keep in mind that that's someone who has graduated but has chosen purposely to come back as a teacher. It's a tremendous sacrifice on their part, because the other realms of service are far more interesting, far easier than teaching recalcitrant human beings. We're a tough nut to crack, unfortunately, and they have infinite patience with us. So our goal is to do that. And Theosophy, we don't have a whole lot of time, so let's
give a little history of Theosophy.
I'll tell. So Theosophy. So what is it? It is an organization that was founded in 1875 in New York City, and it was founded by Helena Blavatsky, who we know of, and a Colonel Henry Olcott, a former colonel in the U.S. Army during the Civil War, who was highly decorated and in fact was one of only 3 people on a panel of investigation for the assassination of President Lincoln. He held high positions in the U.S. Army and in the U.S. government, and was very well respected. So the two of them were very interested in bringing concepts from the East to Europe and America. The ancient wisdom teachings, exactly what we are talking about. Now, H.P. Blavatsky had she had actually spent many years in North India and in Tibet being trained personally by some of these adepts in telepathy and in actually creating phenomena. So these are cities that are the actual results of Raja Yoga. Paul's going to tell you a little bit about Raja Yoga. the final result is that there are tremendous powers that come about naturally. So she, being in touch with these masters, was able to communicate, and she wrote numerous articles and several books. Her first book was called Isis Unveiled. And please keep in mind that both that and The Secret Doctrine were not books that she researched and then wrote. They were written in conjunction with two specifically of these adepts who presented information to her, and she described it sometimes as if she were able to watch a movie in front of her, and she could move it forward and backward. And she had tremendous insight, it wasn't just sound and vision, it was comprehension of human history from thousands of years ago. And in some case millions of years ago, because it also included cosmic history. So it wasn't just her writing this. She even wrote to her sister and said, if you think that I wrote all of this, you're crazy. She said, I can't understand a third of what it is that I'm writing, but it's presented to me in a way that I can comprehend it well enough to write it down. So that, The Secret Doctrine, several other books. The Voice of the Silence was not written by her, but it was translated from Senzar. It's a language that is only known by these adepts and their highest pupils. So that's a quick synopsis of Theosophy. You can go online and read more about it. There's a Theosophical Society in the world today. The U.S. headquarters is in Wheaton, Illinois, outside of Chicago. And I spent a year and a half working and living there in 1980 and 81 as part of my training. So let me have Paul wrap up a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Please talk if you feel like there's something that we're not fleshing out well enough and you'd like to learn more about it now. But we didn't mention earlier, but we do have several other dates on the calendar here at Ganesha Center where we're going to go more into specific concepts and spend a lot more time. We tend to talk a lot, and an hour is not enough for us. The very next one actually is going to be on specific meditation practices for a new age. And I believe that's in
May 19th.
Okay, May 19th. So it's coming up. So
5 weeks.
They've given us a few dates, and depending on the level of interest and how they go, we'll do more hopefully. And we love the facility and we like to keep going with it. But so in conjunction with what we discussed with Raja Yoga, with mind control, kind of sounds like a Jedi mind trick, but it's not. It's just taking control of our own being, basically, and living responsibly. We're stewards of our physical bodies and our emotional bodies and our mental bodies. Our soul is temporarily occupying these, and it's our duty to operate them properly and responsibly for the well-being of all life, not just ourselves, selfishly, but all of humanity and all realms of life. Terry said that minerals even have consciousness. It's our duty to live in conjunction with the path of all evolution of consciousness, from the tiniest mineral, microscopic mineral, up to the angels and the masters and the adepts. So whatever we do and think and feel affects everything, even the globe itself, the planet itself, and our solar system, the evolution of the sun, which is still evolving. There are two concepts that we'll wrap up with that are nuggets of practical aspects of how we do this, how we take a responsible step on the path of spiritual growth. And the two concepts are called Viveka and Vairagya. Has anybody ever heard those before? It's funny, Sanskrit words. They can be described in English as non-attachment, non-reaction, and non-judgment. And so how do we actually practice non-attachment, non-reaction, and non-judgment?
Which one of the names goes with the non-judgment?
It's not it's not one-to-one. They're
I see.
all,
Both of them.
all three
Okay.
terms are. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Viveka is roughly discrimination, so non-discernment, non-judgment. acting with equanimity, reacting with equanimity, not reacting at all. It's the idea of indifference to pleasure or pain. And there are many, many ways that this shows up in our lives and many ways that we can handle it and operate with it. But these two concepts are huge and they're paramount. And once we can say we've truly mastered Viveka and Vairagya, that's the point where we're nearing soul consciousness. The soul doesn't have emotions. The soul itself is always blissful and peaceful. And we can take a clue from our soul. The idea is to operate as if we were in constant soul contact, not reacting, not getting angry when the driver cuts us off, not getting angry at a love partner who ends their love relationship. Can you imagine not reacting to those things? Well, it's very possible, and it seems to us that is the path that humanity is going. That's the evolution of consciousness. That's the expansion of our spirituality, and that's the goal. So Viveka, Vairagya, non-attachment, non-judgment, and non-discrete. I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Not
Non-attachment, non-judgment, non-reaction.
non-reaction.
Those are the three. So. Okay, so I think it's 2 o'clock, and they might have another group coming in soon. So if anyone would like to chat a little bit, we will chat. Otherwise, we're probably done. We have books available, and
have a question.
actually on the audio versions also.
The non-attachment has me a little concerned,
Ah,
because I think that's paramount. I could see, and when I say that word, I automatically go to my family, my loved ones, in my mind. I'm very attached to wanting them to have happiness and growth and what have you. But it's very important to me. And I can't let that, so I want to become involved. And if I find they're going in a different direction, I'm involved. Or if I don't think that the direction is correct or I can help, I can't just leave it. Am I missing, there seems to be a plane that I'm just kind of up there going, oh, whatever, man, I'm cool. I think that's so paramount, so essential. That's part of being the soul, is to care, be it your loved ones or another person, an animal, a dog, a rock. That's vital. What did I miss?
what did she
No, this is a big conversation to have, of course. And we'll go into this a lot. And I think Terry actually has something in the book he wants to.
Chapter 13. The first several chapters of this book have to do with theory and with understanding concepts. But then the last few chapters are really practical applications. So chapter 13 is called How Emotions Affect Us. And it starts with a quote by Abraham Lincoln. It says, most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And then we start the chapter with a section on love and happiness. It says, if you ask most people what they want most in life, they will probably say, to be happy, often followed by, and to be loved. Let's examine these concepts of love and happiness to see why so many fail to achieve these seemingly simple goals. They seem pretty simple, don't they? I just want to be happy and be loved. And yet, it's not that simple. We have relationships where people, even where we say that there's lots of love. You know parent-child relationships where there's lots of knocking heads together. I love you, but I want you to be happy. But I am happy, and I want you to be happy in my way. I won't be happy till you're happy, and I won't be happy until you're happy, until I'm certain that you're happy and doing things a certain way. This is the attachment we're talking to. And you're right, it's extremely difficult, but it's not just not caring. Now, the higher self, the soul, doesn't pay any attention to that, because this is all childhood playground stuff as far as it's concerned. The parent, sees their little 4-year-old child, arguing and combating with teachers and children on the playground. But the enlightened parent doesn't get too concerned with that. They just say, he'll grow up and get out of that, and he'll move on. That's what the soul does too. It looks at us as children. It does not pay any attention to this. It doesn't even pay attention to life and death, which we consider life and death circumstances. We consider death a life and death matter, don't we? It's not. It is not a life and death matter. The soul doesn't look at it that way at all. There is no death because the soul it doesn't die. It will be uplifted and taken over to a different height of consciousness, but it never dies. The true self never dies. So it doesn't worry about this. And I understand your anguish. And this is very common everywhere.
But
Yeah.
then,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was gonna say, is the whole purpose then, as you talk about, I can understand the soul and where this is not their priority, nor should it be. So, if you believe in reincarnation, once you're able as a person and a human being to reach that, you're not coming back anymore. So is that the purpose on earth?
Exactly. The purpose is
To be that last person, to be kind of,
to graduate. Your purpose is to graduate. And it takes, when you go to school, you don't learn everything in one day. There's hundreds or thousands of days of school that you have to go to, and many different years of school. You have different levels. And once you have taken that final step, and there obviously will be one lifetime where that will happen, then you have a choice. Only one of those choices is to come back and help your fellow men, but those individuals don't live out in the public. They stay behind the scenes for very good reasons, which we won't go into, but they're pointed out in the book. They have to maintain, just like the soul, this completely unruffled state of mind in order to function at their highest capacity. And the only way they can do that is to stay away from the people that they're trying to help. Amazingly as it sounds, that's the only way they can do it. And so they do. They are in the background. They don't even care whether we know about them or not, to some extent, until you gain enough enlightenment that they can actually start working with you. But that requires someone who's quite enlightened. So yes, you're absolutely right. And we have gone through all these steps too ourselves. We've had to anguish through and think through, and it's through meditation and contemplation that we begin to grasp the concepts and put them into practice to where it all makes sense.
Maybe, because I know that Smitty's talking about not the concepts of the soul, but of what's happening right now, so the attachment of a loved one, maybe it is you give them the love that you can, but you're not attached to the result,
Exactly.
because that will cause you more pain.
Yes.
that's
Or-
selfish.
Pardon?
That's selfish.
Yes. Well,
That's our ego.
look at it this way. When you see the small child, you realize they have to go through those steps. That's how they grow up. If you kept them out of the playground and out of all these schoolyard altercations, they would never learn anything. They would never learn how to interact with other kids. They have to make mistakes. No one ever learns without making mistakes. No matter how high you get in your accomplishment, you're still going to make mistakes. The spiritual being that is in charge of our solar system makes mistakes every day. Whatever you want to call it, is still learning, doesn't know everything, and still makes mistakes. That's the only way any being ever learns. So we go, if you're going to ride a bicycle, do you watch a movie and a video? No, you get on a bicycle and you fall down 10, 12, 20, 30 times, and then eventually you figure out how to make it work. You do the same thing in life. You make mistakes, you cause trouble, and then eventually you're like, well, that didn't work, let me try something different. And then finally, bingo, that one worked. Okay, I'm going to stick with that. Now where do I go? What's the next one? And then you make more mistakes. That's how we operate. So the non-attachment is to have unconditional love. Okay, you see your children make mistakes in life and you anguish about it. That doesn't help. You tell them what you think is best, and then you stand back and let them make the mistakes. Let them fall down. That's the only way they'll learn. And it may be that what you thought was right is not right for them. They may be following a different path. They may need to experience some things that you didn't have to in life, but they were important for them. So one of the things we learn is to allow every person to experience life at his or her own pace and in their own way. Do you know how many different paths there are to returning to the source? 60 billion. Camino. El camino se hace al andar. Pilgrim, there is no path. You create the path as you go. And that's exactly the way it is. We give you some clues in here as to how to create your own path. By the way, we're always available for questions. If you take our card or contact us on our website, you're always welcome. Our website, by the way, is ancientwisdombook.com. ancientwisdombook.com. And you can contact Paul at ancientwisdombook.com or Terry at ancientwisdombook.com.
Business cards over there, and
A sign-up sheet.
I'm not sure if I had a chance to mention also that the book is also, it's available on the 3 ebook formats also, if you're curious, the Nook, the Kindle, and the iBook as well.
Amazon has the book, Barnes & Noble, they have the softcover and hardcover out here at the center, and we're available to sign them now or in the future. Marlene brought her copy for us to sign. If anybody else has a copy, we're happy to sign it for you.
We also have, if you'd like to be on an email list, we do have that as well. Yeah, so this is sitting over here.
Yeah, pass it around.
Oh, okay.
Just to keep people informed of classes and stuff, that would be nice.
So, Marlene,
So I have
if
one
you
for you.
choose to.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will finish your thought first, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that we've had several presentations for promoting our book. Starting in January, we were in New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut giving talks about our book. And the Theosophical group in New York City is actually using it right now as a study course. They have a 15-week study course, and we help them by writing an outline for the teacher so she can keep ahead of the students. And that's actually going to be the basis for our next book, which is a study guide for this one. It's will be helpful for individuals, but it's more specifically geared towards groups of people who want to get together and study it. We've already had several people who said that they want to use this as a basis, and New York was the very first one to actually do that. In 2 weeks, we're going to be in LA giving a talk in Spanish about one of the elements in our book, which is called Bardo, the period of time between the death of the physical body and the next incarnation, which is a Tibetan term called Bardo. So that one's in Spanish. Then in May, we go back to New York, but to upstate New York in the Catskill Mountains. We're going to be giving a weekend workshop based on Raja Yoga in the New Age. And it's a 3-day workshop starting Friday evening. This is on the weekend of Memorial Day. So that's in upstate New York at a retreat center, and then we have more talks that are being lined up for the fall. So you had a question.
Actually, just one question, sort of a comment about the book. And I'm not extremely well versed in, other than surface religions, as far as like other religions go. I was raised Catholic and have been around metaphysics for a while and with reincarnation and different things. But what I found interesting in your book, probably like my biggest aha from your book, was the fact that we are on the path to becoming an adept. So that, and I guess when I think of other religions or how I was schooled, it was always about we were supposed to take care of ourselves and we would attain heaven, but it was never about a continued ascension. It was sort of like someone else was the power, and we were just going to kind of go bask in their glory. My interpretation of religion. Jewish faiths, which believe there's only one lifetime. Why do you think that your concept, the concept that you gleaned about our progression, is sort of absent from most organized religions? That's a fair question.
I think because most organized religions, and Buddhism is one notable exception, but most organized religions still focus on the personality. They talk about a soul, almost all of them talk about a soul or something equivalent, but it's kind of this unknown quality, this something that is out there somewhere, that we have a soul, but we don't know much about it. We teach just the opposite, that we are the soul, even though we don't recognize that just yet, which is operating through this in order to gain experience. So it's because I believe in most religions, they project whatever they perceive as being the perfect situation in life as to what will happen afterwards in the heaven world, or in whatever you believe, paradise or whatever you want to call it. That if you lived in a palace with servants, and if you're a man, if you have 14 wives or whatever, and you have all the food and drink and entertainment that you want, that's their idea of heaven. We teach that that isn't what's going to happen. We also teach that you don't attain instant enlightenment at death, like a lot of groups, even metaphysical groups sometimes teach that as soon as you die, you know everything. It doesn't work, life doesn't work that way. In school, you have to struggle to learn. And it's the same way in life. You don't ever get anything handed to you except at a certain stage of development, you will sometimes get what we call an act of grace. Some individual or some enlightened being may touch Marlene, for example. Her life will never be the same. It will be like an instantaneous jump in consciousness. Eckhart Tolle describes exactly that sort of thing that happened to him at about age 29. He was never the same afterwards. But on the other hand, this great jump in consciousness diminishes over time. Almost back to where he was at the beginning. But what happens is, it gives you just enough insight into what your possibility is, and then you have to go to work and figure out how to get back up there on your own. What it is you have to change in your outlook and in your everyday practice to create it. You've got to make that happen. And it is a struggle. You proceed laboriously, step by step, trying to figure out how to get back up there, but at least you've experienced it for a period of time and you know what it feels like. So that's how it works. So that's what I would say, is that most of the organized religions were founded by a very enlightened being, but then after that, once that person is gone, they immediately start disintegrating, because then you've got unenlightened beings who are projecting their own ideas, often changing the written stories and the teachings of the original teachers. And in many cases, they were never written down anyway. They were passed orally. And it was maybe only 60 or 100 years later that anyone thought to start writing some of these down. Well, they've been, terribly mutilated in the meantime by having been told and retold so many times, and each one adding his own interpretation to it. Any other questions? Oh, did you have anything to add? I don't. I think we're... Any other questions? All right. Oh.
So when you start the book study, that would be a time when we could ask questions and really get into
Yes.
certain subjects.
We are all about practical applications. That's why it's called A Practical Guide for Spiritual Growth. Let me just kind of end up here by saying that there is a special energy in the world today. When we talk about spiritual hierarchy, we're talking about the adepts, some of their highest students, who are very few, relatively speaking, and the ones above them, which are the Chohans, Maha-Chohans, Bodhisattvas, and then the Buddha himself, the Lord Maitreya, and then the Lord of the world. There's a whole range of spiritual beings clear up to the top of our solar system, and then beyond that in the universe is incalculable. So right now, at the stage where humans are in development on this little speck of mud, we're at a critical phase. We have got to the point where we're just barely producing our own teachers. In the past, those teachers have come from other systems to help us out because we were too primitive, too new, and so we were not able to produce our own teachers. Well, now we are, but only in the last 2,600 years. The Buddha and the Lord Christ were the first two of our own humanity to graduate and to be in a position to show us the way to do it. So it's very recent in geological times. 2,600 years is nothing. But it also means that we have very, very few of our own. Many of the teachers who were sent from other systems have had to go on to other projects. We're not the only ones that they're concerned with. We're just one of many. I know, we're not the center of the universe, I'm sorry.
What?
They used to think that.
Oh my God.
So the point is that we're at a crucial stage. And because of that, they are putting a special effort into trying to get a few more recruits into their level of consciousness, those of the adepts. And the only way they can do that is to reach a few people in the world. You know the saying that many are called but few are chosen? Well, there are several million people in the world who are potential candidates. But out of those several million, there are maybe a handful that will actually take trouble to do all the work that is necessary. The work is daunting. Let me read that just one more time, what HBB, a part of it. She said, "There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount." She's talking about these people that they're trying to recruit. But that's what's required. Dauntless courage, spotless purity, and great intellect, strong intellect. And once you make a certain amount of progress, and it's at a particular initiation, the door slams shut behind you. Up until that point, anyone can kind of fall back down to the general level of humanity and proceed at the slower rate. Once you have reached that level, you're a godder. You now are going to have to, you've closed the door behind you, basically. There is no return. Then you have no choice but to proceed forward and to join their ranks through hard work. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your, did you have anything to add? So let us know if you have any questions later. I'm sure that once you think it over, you'll have some others. Feel free to contact us by phone or email.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.